Abandoned ship on a rock. Here in one of the strangest locations for an abandoned ship imaginable is a strange abandoned ship sitting on a pile of rocks with a forest growing out of its hull. While it may be a little less dramatic than a pirate ship stuck on a small island, it's still pretty incredible and it's 100% real. The ship was apparently built in 1917 back during World War I. It carried petroleum products for the company's Standard Oil, and like other ships at the time, it was eventually used as a cannery up in Alaska. But then in 1966, the ship was scuttled. It now sits completely overgrown on a pile of rocks near Anacortes in Washington state. This ship was actually listed on the National Register of Historic Places back in 1990. You can see the ship from the road as you drive past. However, why exactly the ship is where it is today has proved to be a bit of a mystery. It seems that rather than properly dismantling the boat, it was simply left to rot until it became a historic place all on its own. This is totally against the proper guides for decommissioning a boat, but it seems that whoever was operating it didn't seem to care a lot. Why not scrap it and sell the scrap metal at least? Some things will remain a mystery. Ship on the highway. If you happen to find yourself in the Canadian province of Ontario, you might be lucky enough to spot a gigantic abandoned ship on the highway going from Toronto to Niagara Falls. The ship isn't actually on the highway, it's sitting in the shallow water beside the road, but it's still a pretty odd thing to see, especially if you weren't expecting it. The ship is actually known as the Big Weasel, and it's a replica of the sailing vessel used by the famous explorer Jacques Cartier from the 1500s. The original ship never survived, and neither did the first replica from the 1967 Expo in Montreal. The version you now see abandoned next to the highway in Ontario is actually the second replica made. It was crafted by a businessman with hopes that it would become a floating eatery or casino, but the business failed and the ship was abandoned. In 2003, a mysterious arson destroyed most of the ship, maybe the owner trying to get some insurance money, and what you see today is what happens when you mix history and bad ideas. It's unclear if the owner will ever take the ship away or if the government of Ontario will just let it slowly sink into the water. Have you ever seen an abandoned ship yourself? Where was it? Did you have to go diving, or was it left above the water? Did you explore it or leave it alone? Tell me about your experience exploring abandoned ships by leaving a comment down below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already. There are lots of amazing videos just like this one coming out every day. Blackbeard abandoned his boat. Believe it or not, the infamous pirate Blackbeard may not have been as clever as he's depicted in the movies. Indeed, he was one of the most feared pirates in the Americas, robbing and pillaging where he felt like, but his reign of terror didn't last very long. It's been common knowledge for many years that Blackbeard ran his ship aground in North Carolina back in 1718, but new evidence suggests he may have abandoned his ship on purpose. I'm of course talking about the Queen Anne's Revenge, the flagship vessel of Blackbeard. It was the crown jewel of his pirate fleet. According to historical records, the ship was stranded in 1718 after Blackbeard collected a substantial ransom for lifting his blockade of the port at Charlestown. The ship ended up being abandoned when it struck a sandbar, and it then sank and is still sunken to this very day. For such a fearsome pirate, abandoning his precious craft must have been a big deal. What happened, and why? Up until now, historians figured Blackbeard simply misjudged the depth of the sandbar, causing the ship to get stuck, but it turns out that might not be the case. A recent analysis of the ship's hull revealed that the ship was in awful condition when it ran aground. In fact, it was likely already beyond repair. It was probably leaking water and could not be patched with simple tar and a few planks of lumber. Rather than take it into a pirate ship service center, Blackbeard likely abandoned the ship and took off without it. It was the pirate equivalent of abandoning your worthless car on the side of the highway. It makes a lot of sense too, the same way a criminal might abandon their getaway car right after they peel away from the scene of a crime in order to disguise their tracks. Blackbeard must have felt pretty smart about escaping from his iconic and recognizable pirate ship to continue pillaging freely. Bermuda ghost ship. Ships are abandoned all the time. Just recently, an abandoned cargo ship washed up on the coast of Ireland, seemingly from nowhere. According to the report from the BBC, the vessel drifted thousands of miles over more than a year from somewhere south of Bermuda all the way to the shores of Ireland. In September of 2018, the United States Coast Guard had rescued the crew members of the boat, which had been crafted in 1976. The vessel had encountered problems while sailing from Greece to Haiti, and a power outage caused the boat to drift at sea for 20 days before the Coast Guard became aware of it. The Coast Guard then rescued the crew as a hurricane approached, and afterwards the ship was just kind of left to its own devices. It was spotted a few times since 2018, randomly bobbing through the Atlantic Ocean, and now it's washed up on shore for the curious public to take photos of. However, whether the boat will stay on the shore or if the tide will wash it back out to continue its mysterious and ghostly journey across the seven seas is yet to be determined. What does not make any sense though is why no one has captured the ship and begun disassembling it for scrap metal. They could even refurbish it and it would be worth a lot of money. The whole situation is awfully strange, to be honest. Abandoned Renaissance town with pirate ship. Everyone wants to hear about pirate ships, ancient relics, and the possibility of buried treasure, right? This place has it all. A creaking pirate ship is sitting abandoned in Sherwood Forest, Virginia, but not just a pirate ship. There's a crumbling stone castle, a rotting two-door mansion, and all kinds of eerie sights from the Renaissance era. In fact, it's an entire theme park based on the Renaissance that opened to the public in the 1990s and then closed 3 years later and was subsequently abandoned. While the pirate ship obviously wasn't used for any piracy, it's still a pretty shocking thing to see sitting on the bank of a river in the middle of a Virginia forest. Everything in the park is crumbling into dust, and the pirate ship is essentially a death trap. It seems like the whole place might be haunted, or it could be filled with unfriendly wildlife. The whole situation is totally bizarre. Why hasn't the park been refurbished or turned into something new? It's a perfect place for daredevils and thrill seekers to go for an adventure. While definitely a mysterious place to explore, I don't recommend trying to board this particular vessel. Rotting cruise ships. Pirate ships and cargo ships are not the only types of ships to be abandoned. Try saying that 3 times fast. In 2020, many cruise ships ended up being abandoned because of the coronavirus pandemic. As you can imagine, maintaining a cruise ship is ridiculously expensive, especially when there are no customers on it. The result has been shipyards permanently closed and cruise ships being forgotten and dismantled all over the globe. For example, the cruise company Carnival lost at least $2.9 billion according to the New York Times, and they have abandoned 18 of their ships already. The big mystery here is what the future of cruise ships will look like, whether anyone will ever board a cruise ship again, and what will happen to the thousands of unused ships all around the world. It might be a great time to pick yourself up a cheap cruise ship all for yourself. I wonder what it would cost to create your own floating party palace, even if you just anchor it in port and charge people to come aboard for dinner and drinks. You could also play a really amazing game of hide and seek on one of these abandoned hulks. We also might see a lot of these vessels washed up on random beaches around the world. The Lady Lovabond Ghost Ship. Perhaps the most mysterious boat ever to sail the seven seas is the Lady Lovabond. This ship sailed back in the days when sailors believed it was horrendously bad luck for a woman to be on board of a ship when it was out at sea. And in this case, it really was. Back in 1748, the Lady Lovabond left port from England en route to Portugal. The captain brought with him his new wife. So far as the legend goes, one of the men aboard the ship was jealous of the captain and his wife, and so he took control of the ship and steered it directly into an area known as the Goodwin Sands, essentially sacrificing the entire vessel and killing everyone on it. But here's where the story gets interesting. Exactly 50 years to the day after the ship was destroyed, the captain of the ship Edenbridge recorded in his log that he nearly collided with a schooner that looked identical to the Lady Lovabond. Another 50 years and the same thing happened again on February 13th. This recurrence went on until 1948, leading people to believe that every 50 years the mysterious ghost ship appears in the same place. People even went out to the area of Goodwin Sands in 1998 on February 13th to try and catch a glimpse of it, but the ship never showed. Now we have to wait until 2048. Fire Island Shipwreck. The Bessie White was a Canadian schooner that ran aground on Fire Island. This happened either in 1919 or 1922, as the historical records are a bit confusing, but the boat definitely ran aground, filled with water, and ended up a complete loss. The crew survived, but the cargo was lost and the ship was eventually salvaged. Most of the wreck was taken apart, and the few pieces remaining washed out to sea. Now keep in mind, this was in the early 1900s. Then in 2012, the hull of a mysterious ship was found beached on Fire Island. The hull was rotted and old, and it definitely did not come from any modern vessel. Experts believe it's the mysterious remains of the Bessie White, though the real mystery is whether the hull had been on the beach the whole time or if it floated around the world and came back to land in the exact same spot. Sugarboat Shipwreck. For 40 years, there has been an overturned hulk of a ship sitting in the middle of the River Clyde in Scotland. It's known as the Sugar Boat Shipwreck, and it was destroyed during a storm back in 1974. While the storm was not overly mysterious, the fact that the boat has remained sideways and abandoned in the middle of the river is nothing short of a miracle. There have been plans over the years to blow it out of the water, but it's never happened. And nobody has bothered trying to salvage it because there have been disputes over who even owns the boat, so it's probably going to sit in the water sideways as a strange and mysterious eyesore for the next 40 years. I wonder what kinds of animals have made this rotting piece of metal into their underwater home. The MV Joyita. The MV Joyita is the most mysterious abandoned ship ever. It was a merchant vessel that went missing in October of 1955. The ship was in pretty rough condition when it set out, but that does not account for what happened. You see, after the ship went missing, it was discovered 5 weeks later adrift with not a single person on board. The crew appeared to have abandoned the vessel and then vanished into thin air. The boat was in no danger of sinking, so it's highly unlikely that the crew had abandoned the ship. And in any case, there was no sign that they had packed up and gone. But to make things even more mysterious, there were 4 tons of cargo missing, and the radio was turned to the International Marine Radio Telephone Distress Channel. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the crew or why they abandoned the MV Joyita. Do you have any theories regarding these mysteriously abandoned vessels? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to come back soon for another great video, and don't forget to subscribe.